Chapter 2. How is it possible to go from having a spaceship that can, within all reasonable limits, take you pretty much any inhabited spot in the galaxy to, less than 24 hours later, being trapped on Earth in a facility for insufficiently obedient children? A lot of things have to go wrong, and though it was a small consolation, none of these things had been my fault. There is actually a fair amount of evidence to support the theory that sometimes things can happen without my direct involvement. The day before the incident, now known to history as the lunchroom catastrophe, we had tunneled into Earth's solar system in our stolen former ship, emerging among the outer gas giants. That's where we learned that my home planet was now in the hands of the Phatic Empire. Rather than risk being seen by our enemies, Steve set a course for another quick jump to the nearest star on the ship's charts, less than half an hour away. In the meantime, we'd cooked up a plan. We were going to figure out a way to rescue some prisoners from the Fads, a group that included our friends Niana and Urch. More importantly, as far as the stability of galactic culture was concerned, it included Confederation Director Glee Wixix and Captain Hyai of the Kind Disposition. Both had information that could lead to the overthrow of Junip, who had seized power after Glee Wixix's supposed death at my supposed hands, and then secretly allied the Confederation, or at least his own power base, with the Phatic Empire. Given that the Fads had been at the Confederation's mercy, thanks to the technology stolen by my gang of rebels, I might add, Junip's alliance was the only thing keeping the Empress's oppressive lights on right now. So, it was actually pretty simple. Get a small band of kids who didn't know what they were doing, accompanied by an adult who kept telling them what they wanted to do was crazy, and infiltrate an evil empire. Discover the location of a top-secret prison holding beings who were probably the most heavily guarded inmates in the galaxy, and break them out. Sure, there were some leaps of faith hardwired into this scheme, but we'd done crazier things. I know this is not the most convincing argument out there, but I thought it had more going for it than let's do nothing and hope everything works out swell. Besides, we had one serious advantage. We were now maxed out superheroes. That definitely goes in the plus column. Our last fun-filled excursion through Confederation Central had taken us through the underground hidden fortress, an ancient facility established by the mysterious precursor aliens, the Formers. Before escaping, we'd managed to upload nanites that not only gave us the standard Confederation skill tree, but the newly rediscovered military tech tree. As soon as we'd gotten what we wanted, in what may have been the worst act of vandalism in the history of the galaxy, we destroyed all that former technology in order to keep it from falling into the wrong hands, claws, or tentacles. If we hadn't done it, the bad guys might have gotten a hold of some unstoppable weapons, so I knew it was the right thing to do, but it still felt like destroying the Library of Alexandria, times a billion. Once we had the skill creating and enhancing nanites swimming through our bloodstreams, Tamrat hacked in and maxed out both skill trees for everyone. None of us were entirely sure of all the crazy things we could do now. In fact, the system seemed designed to make it difficult for the user to learn about these skills except by experimenting. There was no clear tech progression, like there was with the standard Confederation upgrades. Instead, skills followed one another in what seemed to be random patterns, and I couldn't find a list or a map to let me know all the things I could do now. The best I could manage was to search for skills using my HUD and hope the skill I was looking for existed. It was a little frustrating, but I was looking forward to discovering new abilities while simultaneously making every Fad and Junip follower I ran into eat a little plastic cup of humiliation pudding. Also on my mind was the question of whether or not Tamret, who had done said hacking, was my girlfriend. With all the escaping, destroying, and surviving against all odds we'd been up to lately, we hadn't had the chance for an honest heart-to-heart sit-down. The fact that it had been impossible for us to get more than 3.5 feet away from her former fiancé hadn't helped. Lots of things to juggle, yes, but I knew what we had to do. After what had felt like a long period of helplessness, a sense of purpose felt great. Defy a brutal military empire, redraw the lines of galactic power, rescue my planet, and sort things out with an alien cat girl I liked. It was going to be a busy week. A good week, but busy. At least, I thought so, until everything went wrong, which, honestly, I should have expected. Steve piloted us out of Earth's system in a hurry. We hadn't had a chance to carefully review the galactic maps, but I figured there should be nothing much happening around Alpha Centauri. I was wrong. There were about a gazillion phatic ships in the system. Doing what, you might ask? Good question, but no one on my ship was suggesting we find out before we came up with a way to escape. And yes, a gazillion may have been an exaggeration, but I wasn't counting. The actual tally was more than a few and fewer than infinity.
There's like a gazillion phatic ships in this system, mate,
Steve said, in his inexplicable working-class London accent. He flicked his reptilian tongue like he was trying to taste the number of enemies in the air.
Get us out of here!
Volonic screeched. He was staring at the view screen, his eyes wide and his cat-like ears pressed back in alarm. I would not have screeched, personally, and given that he'd been trying to marry Tamrat, I wasn't so inclined to sympathize with Volonic, but I still understood his sentiment. The problem was that interstellar travel doesn't allow for quick and easy departures. You can't just zip merrily around from star to star on a whim. Punching a direct, navigable hole in reality and coming out the other end is not, if I may make an analogy, like dusting crops. It's more like doing advanced math while playing Jenga on a pogo stick while you try to invent a new musical scale. It can't be done by normal beings. It can only be done, in fact, by beings who are both naturally gifted and have taken points in the appropriate skill trees while using computers designed by the long-vanished civilization of unfathomable intellect. It doesn't help with hysterical aliens, beings who are not really in your group of friends and who were trying to marry girls that they should not have been trying to marry, are screeching. Tamrat and Charles were busy working the navigation and helm consoles, trying to figure out a way out of the system, or at least a place to hide. The first priority had to be avoiding detection by the Fads. Meanwhile, I was warming up the weapons console. Rightly or wrongly, I was considered the go-to guy in our group for making things turn into fiery balls of destruction. Sometimes I only blew up what I was supposed to, sometimes things got a little more creative. All I knew was that the majority of beings I liked in the universe were on that ship with me, and I was not letting the Fads take us without a fight.
Before we start giving our position away with weapons fire, Steve said to me, I might have a bit of a plan.
Let's hear it, I said. Better yet, let's do it. You can tell me about it after.
It's these new skill implants, yeah?
He said, scratching his Komodo dragon head like he was trying to get a handle on this plan, even as he explained it.
I think I may have figured out a way for us to get out of here, but I don't really understand it.
Dr. Roop, the only adult on our ship, now peered over our shoulders, stretching his long giraffe-like neck between us.
The formers had navigation skills we have only begun to guess at,
he said in his curiously Dutch-sounding accent.
Your mind must have intuitively picked up on one of the possibilities and is urging you to take it. Perhaps you should listen. It shouldn't be possible based on what I know, Steve explained. But let's face it, I don't know all that much. I have this idea that I can reverse our tunnel, pretty much send us back where we came from. Pretty close, anyhow.
If you think you can do it, I said, that sounds like our best option.
What good is that?
Volonic demanded.
We came here in order to escape from Zeke's conquered system. There were Fads there as well.
In spite of him having performed some inexplicable rural ritual that made me his brother, I could always count on Volonic to complain about any plan I liked.
The good thing, Steve said, is that no one knew we were there. We tunneled out before they detected us. Here, we're right on top of these blokes, so they're gonna notice us in a matter of seconds. When that happens, they'll come looking to crack open our ship and get the nutmeats inside. Do you fancy being the nutmeats, mate?
Volonic did not answer, but I thought it was safe to take the question as rhetorical. No one in the history of creation has fancied being the nutmeats.
So, we go somewhere else after we get back to our system?
Misan asked.
How do we know that won't be just as bad?
The galaxy is very large, Charles said, and the odds of any particular place we choose having a gazillion Fads are relatively small. I say it's a risk worth taking.
It being a risk worth taking, we took the risk. Steve did a thing that he didn't understand very well, and we understood even less, and with a half-dozen phatic saucers moving in with their metaphorical nutcrackers at the ready, we popped back into tunnel. Now, we had to wait half an hour to get back to the place we didn't want to be. It made sense to have another destination in mind by the time we emerged so we could reroute in a hurry. Dr. Roop suggested the nearby Wolf 359 system, but Charles and I vetoed it on the grounds that it was the site of the devastating Federation defeat by the Borg.
It's courting bad luck,
Charles insisted. Instead, we opted for the binary Ludian 726-8 system, which had no sci-fi connotations that I was aware of. It was uninhabited and uninhabitable, therefore with zero strategic value. It seemed as good a place as any for us to catch our breath. We had to get there first, though. Once we re-emerged from tunnel in my home system, Steve needed to plug in the new coordinates and tunnel out. With the engines hot and the coordinates ready, we should have been able to evacuate in a matter of minutes. And that is exactly what would have happened had something much worse not happened instead. The trip back to my solar system was a little bit tense. Sure, none of us knew exactly what to expect. I spent most of my time sitting at the weapons console, though there wasn't anything to target while in tunnel. We were maybe halfway through the trip when Alice came over to me.
Can I talk to you for a minute?
She was busy taking her massive, nearly colorless hair out of a black elastic and putting it back in. Tamrat looked up from us from her console, but didn't say anything. Her lavender eyes seemed to glow against the background of her white fur. I got up, and Alice and I walked to the back of the ship. What's up?
I don't know if this is going to be possible now,
she said.
But if there's any way that you can do it safely, I want you to drop me on Earth before you go on the rescue mission.
What? Why? This took me by surprise. Alice had been so desperate to get into space that she'd stowed away on a shuttle, risking her life just for the chance to see life in the wider galaxy. Since then, she'd been a valuable member of the team. I knew what we were going to attempt was risky, but no more so than things we'd already done. With our augmentations, maybe it was a whole lot less risky than things we'd already done.
Look,
she said.
You guys have been great to me and everything, and I really want to be a part of what you've got planned, but there's an alien army on Earth. I have to believe they're not going to be too nice to people who used to be in the military. I'm worried about my dad, and Uncle Jacanto.
She rubbed at her eyes, maybe to keep from crying.
Especially my dad.
Alice's father had been suffering from PTSD. He drank too much and generally seemed out of it. I knew she felt terrible about leaving him behind, but now that things had fallen apart on Earth, he might really need her help. The sooner we get the Fads off of Earth, the safer he'll be. I understand if you want to go back, but you could be doing him more good by staying with us.
Maybe,
she said.
I don't know, but I think he might need me now. With my new abilities, there's probably a lot I can do to help Earth while you guys are taking care of the big picture. Besides, Tamret doesn't want me here.
She glanced over at Tamret, who was pretending not to watch us. She'll be fine. She just needs to get used to having you around, if that's the real reason.
It's a real reason,
she said.
But not the only one. I don't know if I can have my head in the game if I'm worried about my father the whole time. Getting everyone out of that prison isn't going to be easy, and you don't need a team member who's distracted.
I understood what it was like to worry about your parents. I mean, I'd gone to Confederation Central in the first place because I wanted to help my mom. I get it. I'd hate to see you go, but if that's what you need to do, I won't try to talk you out of it. I mean, assuming we can even get you to Earth safely.
Let's see how that goes,
she said.
And then we can decide what to do.
A few minutes later, Tamret came over to speak with me. Like the rest of us, she was still wearing the clothes in which we'd been wandering around in the Forbidden Zone. Most of the dust had worn off by now, though, and somehow she managed to look relatively neat. You're not going to give me a hard time about Alice, are you? I asked her. She smirked at me, her lavender eyes crinkling with amusement.
Seriously? Am I supposed to be jealous?
Her response was not what I'd expected, and so I may have had a hard time making any sound that didn't sound like sputtering. Tamret's expression hardened slightly.
I don't need to be jealous, do I?
No, of course not, I said, maybe a little too quickly. She didn't, of course. Tamret was the most amazing girl I'd ever met. She was brazen and smart and maybe a little bit reckless, but the most important thing to me was she made me feel like I was those things too. When Tamret was around, I could go places and do things I would never have had the guts to do before I met her, and she always made me feel like I could get the job done. Anyhow, I said, Alice wants to see if she can leave when we get to Earth.
Really?
Tamret's ears rotated slightly backwards.
I thought she wanted to be in on the action.
She does, but she's worried about her dad. Tamret nodded.
I'd have given her a hard time if it were something stupid, but if my parents were still around, I'd want to make sure they were safe too.
Her parents had disappeared into the black hole of her country's prison system when she was a little girl. Tamret had no idea if they were alive, but I got the sense she assumed the worst. The way things were on her planet, she had no reason to be optimistic. I knew that was one of the reasons she had been fighting so hard for the Confederation. If she could get membership for her world, the oppressive rulers and tight caste systems of Rarl would come crashing down. She thinks you have a problem with her, I said, feeling like I was on thin ice.
Maybe at first,
Tamret admitted.
Things were weird with us when I got back to Confederation Central.
Weird in this case meant she'd shown up with a total dork as her fiancé, but that was in the past, so there was no point in dwelling on it.
But she's a good member of the team. I'd rather she stuck around, but I understand why she needs to go.
She looked relaxed, and I knew she was being completely honest. She usually was, unless she thought she needed to protect someone from the truth. It was just one more thing that I admired about her. I spent so much time on Confederation Central worrying about how intense she was, how she might hate Alice because she'd see her as a rival, and now, once again, I saw I'd been an idiot to underestimate her. I wanted to talk to her about whether or not we were a thing, and if she was still planning on coming back to Earth with me when this was all over. But it seemed like the wrong time. It always seemed like the wrong time. What with planetary invasions and upheavals and galactic civilization and all that. Maybe, I thought, it didn't matter. She wanted to sit near me while we recovered from the last crisis and waited for the next one. For now, that was enough.